Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture what we will do is that we will go and learn how to go ahead and sign up a user. So obviously you have created this application and the application works fine, but the thing is that you also need to provide sign in, sign up and logout facility in your application as well. So in this lecture we will learn about signing up the user, and then after that we are going to learn about the login process, and then after that we are going to learn about logging out. So in order to add the sign up facility to the application, you just need to go to Tools, Firebase, and then after going to Firebase you need to go into Authentication and click this thing right over here, and it says that the Firebase dependencies for authentication are added to your application, and if it's not added then simply click this icon right here and accept the changes. So let me just go ahead and quickly see if the dependency is added. So let me just go to the Gradle file, and this is for storage, and yeah, the authentication dependency is added in our application. So I almost forgot that. So once the application dependency is added, we are basically good to go. So what you need to do now is that you need to go to the main activity.java code, and in here you need to create the authentication object for Firebase. So that's going to be private Firebase auth, and that's going to be, let's say, m auth. And once we have this object, what we need to do is that we need to go ahead and get a reference. So even before that, what we do is that we type in private, that's going to be Firebase auth dot auth state listener, and that's going to be, let's say, m auth listener. So once we have this two things, the next thing which we do is that we go ahead in the onCreate method right over here, and we will type in mauth equals Firebase auth dot get instance, and then after this we will type in mauth listener equals new Firebase auth dot auth state listener, and as you could see, we already have this method inside it, which is the on auth state changed. So here what we want to do is that we want to make sure that if the user is not authenticated, then what we want to do is that we want to make the user register. So what we will do is that if the user is not registered, we are going to redirect him to the register activity. So we type if Firebase auth dot get current user, and if we don't get any current user, that means this is going to be null. So if this thing happens, what we want to do is that we want to start a new intent. So we'll type in intent, and that's going to be the login intent equals new intent, and we basically want to redirect user to the register class. So that's going to be main activity dot this comma register activity dot class. So we have not yet created this register activity, but we are going to create that soon. And once this thing is done, what we want to make sure is that when the user clicks the back button, he should not be able to go back to the previous activity. So we type login intent dot add flags, and that's going to be intent dot, that is going to be flag activity clear task. So once this thing is done, final thing which we do is that we start the activity, which is the login intent. So once this thing is done, we need to go ahead and create the register activity. So I'm going to go right over here, create a new, that's going to be an activity, an empty activity. Let's name it as register activity. Click finish, and our activity is going to be created for us. So now in the register activity, what we are going to do is that we are going to set up a few things, that is the name field, email field, the password field. So in here what we will do is that we'll go to the XML code of the register activity. So let me just go to the layout, and that is the register activity right over here. So let me just quickly make this thing as a linear layout, and the orientation for this is going to be vertical. And let me just quickly go ahead and add edit text. So that's going to be edit text, match parent, wrap content. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to simply copy this edit text, and I'm going to paste it twice for the other two as well, so that I don't have to keep on writing this code again and again. So this is going to have an ID, which is going to say something like name field, FIELD. This is going to have an ID which says something like the let's say email field, and the final one is going to be having an ID which says something like, let's say, pass field. So once these three things are set up, let's also add some hints. So that's going to be, let's say, enter name. This is going to say enter email, and the final one is going to say enter password. Okay, so once this thing is done, we are basically good to go. Now we only need to go ahead and add a button at the bottom so that when the button is clicked, the user is able to register. So I'm going to add in a button over here with match parent and wrap content, and the text on this button is going to be, let's say, register. So we'll type in register over here, and the on click of this is going to be, let's say, register button clicked. Okay, so once this thing is set up, we are basically good to go. So here what we will do is that we will go ahead and we will start getting a reference to them and making this entire layout functional. But even before that, what we want to do is that we want to go into the main activities on start, and here what you wish to do is that you want to set the auth listener. So here you want to type in mauth dot add auth state listener, and you want to pass in the mauth listener over here. So after this, let's get back to the register activity, and this is the register activities Java code, and in here the first thing which we will do is that we'll get a reference to each and every field. So in order to save time, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to type in the code, pause the video, and I'm going to come back later. Okay, so as you could see, I have added a bunch of fields over here. So this is basically the edit text, and this is basically the Firebase auth which we'll be using over here. And also one more thing which we need over here is the database reference. So that's going to be private database reference database. And once we have this thing, the next thing which we do is that in the on create, we get a reference to each and every field over here as well. So that's going to be name field equals, that's going to be edit text, find view by id r.id dot, that's going to be edit name, and I'm simply going to copy the same code and paste this for the edit text for password and email as well. So this is going to be password field, that's going to be pass field, this is going to be email field, and this is going to be email as well, and that's actually going to be email field. Okay, and I also mistakenly gave colons over here instead of semicolons, so let me just fix that. So once this thing is done, what we do is that once we have the Firebase auth object, we basically go ahead and get its instance. So mauth equals Firebase auth.get instance, and we also get a reference to the database as well. So that's going to be mdatabase equals Firebase database dot get instance dot get reference dot child, and we want to make a reference to users. So what we essentially want to do is that we also want to register the user, and while registering the user, we want to store the registered data of that user into the database, and that's the reason why we are actually having the reference to the database as well. So once this thing is done, what we want to do is that we want to go ahead and make the register button functional. So if you actually go over here, as you could see, this is the button which we are talking about, and the method associated with this button is register button clicked. So let me just quickly copy that method, go over here, and that's going to be public void register button clicked. Let's say it has view, and after this what we will do is that we will go ahead, and the first thing which we do is that as we want to post and get the data from these three edit text and post it into the database, the first thing which you need to do is that you need to get data from each and every text field, from each and every edit text. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to type in string name equals, and we get the data from name field. So name field dot get text dot toString dot trim, and I'm going to do the same thing for each and everything. So that's going to be same for the email as well as the password. So this is for name, this is for email, and this is for password. So I'm going to quickly make changes over here. So that's going to be email field, this is going to be password, this is going to be for pass field, and we are good to go. So after taking these values, we do want to make sure that these values entered by the user are not empty. So for that, what we do is that we type in if and use text utils. So text utils dot is empty name, and the same applies for the email and password as well. So again, I'm going to copy this code, paste it over here. This one is going to be for email, and the last one is going to be for password. So is empty pass. So in case if everything is okay and nothing is empty, so in that case we want to proceed ahead, and we basically want to use the create users with email and password method. So for that we use the mauth. So that's the purpose of using mauth over here. So mauth dot create users with email and password, and in here pass in the email, pass in the password, and finally add an on complete listener to it, which states that now everything has been completed. So this is going to be on complete listener, and we are going to have the on complete method inside here as well. So in this case, when everything is completed, the first thing we want to do is that we want to check if the task is successful. So we type in if, that's going to be task dot is successful. Then in that case, what we want to do is that we want to go ahead and first get the user ID, because we want to get the user ID. So we will type in string, let's name it as user underscore ID. So that should be equal to mauth dot get current user dot get UID. So this is actually going to give you the access to the unique ID of the user. And then what we do is that we go ahead and get a reference to the database as well. So database reference, let's say current user DB equals mdatabase dot child, and we set the child equal to the user ID which we just got. So this is going to be user ID. And the final thing which we do is that we set the name and the image for the user. So what we will do is that we will go ahead and type in current user DB dot child, and this is going to be name dot set value. We are going to set the value to name. So as you could see, after setting up the name, it's actually giving us an error, and that is because the thing is you actually want to set the field to final. So I'm going to go here and type the name field as final, and I'm actually going to do the same thing with the other fields as well, but I guess for now it's okay. So after this, what we are going to do is that we are going to set the image for the current user as well. So I'm going to type in child, that's going to be image dot set value, and right now as we don't have any value for the image, I'm going to just type in default over here. But in the upcoming lectures, we are actually going to have images over here as well. So finally, once this thing is done, what we want to do is that we want to redirect a user to the main activity once he is registered. So we'll type in intent, let's say main intent, and make sure to have I in capitals. So that's going to be main intent equals new intent, and that's going to be register activity dot this comma, that is going to be main activity dot class. So once this thing is done, we finally actually add the flags over here. So I'm going to quickly go ahead and add flags. Okay, so once the flags are added, the next thing which we do is that finally we start the activity for the main intent. So once this thing is done, we are basically good to go. Now what we also want to do is that we want to make sure that the user should also be able to log out once he is redirected to the main activity. So if you actually go to the menu, which is this menu right here, and if you switch to the text view, as you could see, we have two items over here. So let's also create another item, and I am actually going to copy the same thing from here, paste it right over here, and this is going to be having an ID which is, let's say, logout. So this is going to be an option for logout, and the title is going to be logout as well. So I'm going to title equals logout, and show as action never is okay. And what this is actually going to do is that it's going to log out the user once the user clicks over here. So in order to set up the code for this, we are going to go to the main activity, and in here, if you scroll down to the bottom, as you could see, we do need to add a condition over here for that ID as well. And actually this should be else if. I actually missed it over here because okay. And also let's add another else if condition over here. So that's going to be else if the ID is equal to r.id that's going to be logout. So in that case, what we want to do is that we want to go ahead and type in mauth.signout. So once this thing is done, we are basically good to go. So we have successfully added in the signing functionality for our application. So in the next lecture, what we will do is that we will go ahead and we will also create the login functionality. And once the login functionality is created, we are going to basically run our application and test if it works. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.